hold up. Don't let me make you feel like you have to buy this deck if you're actually not really feeling it, okay? My intention for this video is not to make you feel like you have to buy this if you don't have a need for it. It's to share how I personally use it, how I enjoy it, how I find it helpful. Hi, Sarah here. Welcome back. So I want to share with you some cool ways that I've used these spread machine decks recently. This was inspired by Livy's comment on Sylvie of Tarot Magpie's video. Their comment said, I do admit, I find myself confused about how people would actually make spreads from these cards. Because they have prompt questions on them, correct? So do you take the questions and make random spreads based on them? So I've had these spread machine decks since they came out from Kickstarter in 2020 and 2021. I've always wanted to make videos about them, but have never really known what to do. So this comment is really inspiring now to show how I've actually done spreads and readings with these cards. This will not be like a straight up walkthrough card by card of this deck. This will not be going super in depth with every single category. There are other walkthrough videos that Kim has made herself on her channel Fables Den, and other walkthrough videos that other people have made with these decks. What I want to do is I want to show you practical ways that I've used these cards recently. So let's get into it. So first, to introduce the decks and the creator. So these decks were created by Kimberly M. San. She also created the Way of the Panda Tarot and the Sparkly Little Ma. These were initially called the Spread Machine cards, although now the current edition calls them the Spread Crafter's Oracle. I'm probably going to still refer to them as Spread Machine because that's just the way that I've known them. So we have the Spread Machine base deck here, and we have these two expansions, Quest and Change. Although these are called expansions, they're actually more like standalone decks in this series. So you don't have to have this base deck if you want to use just the Quest or the Change expansion. This base deck is like a general catch-all spread crafting deck. Spread Machine Quest is all about game terms, and Change is all about social activism, social justice, a lot of change types of words. Within every deck has certain categories of cards. So this one, we've got focus areas here. Seeker cards, these are cards related to the querent, challenge, worldview, intention. Call to action cards. Within this call to action category, there's a lot of different categories. So boundary cards, expansion. I like to pull these cards at the end of a reading or as the last card of a reading, as what action should I be taking next after this reading? We have shadow work cards, so these explain shadows and things that we might have trouble acknowledging, but we might need to explore deeper. And light work cards, so opposite of shadow work, probably things that we want to acknowledge and continue doing. Every card has a keyword, a key prompt on the top, and they also have little prompts, just subtopics, sub-questions for you to think about with each card. Let me be the first to say, I'm not intending for this to be an advertisement or a commercial of any sort. Don't let me make you feel like you have to buy this deck if you're actually not really feeling it, okay? My intention for this video is not to make you feel like you have to buy this if you don't have a need for it. It's to share how I personally use it, how I enjoy it, how I find it helpful. Maybe the ideas that I'm presenting here, hopefully you'll find some of them helpful to adapt into your own practice. But, if you don't need this deck, obviously don't buy it. And I especially say that because these are independently published decks. So they definitely get pretty pricey, especially when you're trying to buy internationally. And I remember seeing a comment somewhere on some other walkthrough video that was like, it's just words on cards. Anyone can make this. And yeah, you don't have to buy this deck. You can make your own cards just like any other Oracle deck or Tarot deck out there. I'm all about mindful purchasing and mindful consuming, right? You can just take the concepts that work for you and adapt them into your own practice. If you want to make your own prompt cards and spread cards, you totally can. Now, on the flip side, I will say there's a lot of love and care and attention to detail that goes into this deck because of the way Kim is as a person and as a creator. Kim San has her own blog called Fables Den, and she has her own YouTube channel of the same name. She was one of the first tarot bloggers and YouTubers that I learned about when I was getting into tarot. A lot of Kim's brand, a lot of Kim's personal philosophy approach to the cards is very creative. Some of her most popular videos is tarot journaling, how to creatively journal with tarot cards. A lot of her philosophy about tarot is also about gamifying tarot, gamifying life. She uses concepts like leveling up life, beating the final boss, a lot of game terms like that. And so her approach to tarot and card reading, card slinging it can be whimsical at times. It's very fun. For her, card slinging is not just about doing deep, serious, grim, dark tarot readings all the time. There can be a lot of fun and whimsicality to it, using analogies and metaphors, categorizing your life, your concepts in different ways. If you like spreadsheets, if you like, subcategorizing things, I think these decks will scratch that kind of itch for you really well. It definitely does for me. Not only are these keywords here fantastic and already a lot to think about, the different prompts, the questions, the clarifying text down here, it also adds a lot to every reading. It's always helpful for me because sometimes if I see just a single keyword like affirmation, sometimes I forget like what does affirmation mean? And when I have these different sub questions here, I can choose, certain words to hone in on or certain questions to hone in on. So there's just so much richness in this deck that I just really, really enjoy for card reading and for spread making. And last thing I'll say about this creator, about this like deck introduction, is that Kim also has her own like spread crafting course. So that goes along with her like creative card slinging, right? Like it's not just about basic, simple, straightforward 3-card spreads or like circular spreads. She has a spread crafting course even where she describes and explains and teaches how to build spreads that are in different shapes, like maybe triangle or maybe like in a line, but then you have some that are stacked and some going upward. It's just a really cool way of using the shape of spreads to help craft the story of the reading. So yeah, I think that this deck is a fantastic tool for nurturing the creativity in you, but at the same time, I can also understand how such a big deck with so many different possibilities can be really overwhelming and too open-ended. So let's move on to some examples of readings that I've actually done with these decks recently. All right, so for this example, I have the Quest expansion, the Quest deck in front of me. As I mentioned, the Quest deck is all game terms. So D&D, video games, board games, adventure type games, these are the types of terms that are in this deck. So to briefly go over the categories of the Quest deck, we have character cards, kind of imagine them as like character creation. We have power-ups, these are like boosts, they empower you, give you advantages. We have equipment cards. Imagine these as like things you can equip, things you can bring along with you to also boost you. Status cards. These are things that might affect you, afflictions like paralyzed and burned and cursed. And lastly, we have embark cards. So these are just events, milestones. Think of them as like adventure type cards. Now, again, this can seem really overwhelming, maybe the categories, these subcategories are really overwhelming. Maybe just the amount of cards in every single stack is just too overwhelming. So to put it in practice, let me share an example of a reading that I just did. So for a reading exchange that I did last month, the querent requested a reading that was just about winter vibes, just some wintry themed spread. I saw that they were into like D&D and other tabletops, so I thought that this Quest deck would be a really fun way to do that kind of reading. I decided to look through the deck and look for cards that just pertain to this wintry vibe, winter theme. For me, I associate winter with like healing, with hibernating, with regrouping. So I looked for cards that might feed into that like regrouping, that maybe uncertain vibe kind of feel. Honestly, I was kind of spitballing because, the fun of this deck is just not really knowing exactly what you're going to do, just kind of playing around and whittling down possibilities for cards that might work. So for example, I looked through this little section here, the category section, and through all the cards, I decided to choose the sidekick card because I feel like in winter, it would be nice to have like a healer of sorts. The sidekick card says your loyal helper, follower, and cheerleader, someone that can serve as your resource and support. So I was like, yeah, sidekick sounds like a great wintry addition. And then I did the same thing for all of these other categories. Just looked for cards that were like wintry, that hibernating, growing, some kind of themes like that, and just pulled them aside and tried to do a reading with them. So let me look for those cards and recreate that spread right now. All right, so here are the 6 cards that I pulled for that winter vibes kind of reading. So talking through my thought process here, I tried to do 1 card from every single category, but there were 5 categories and I wanted to do a 6th card, so I ended up doing 2 power-up cards. So in that theme of like winter is a time for recharging, regrouping, kind of looking ahead a little bit, there's uncertainty. Walking through my example spread here, we have North Star. I imagine this as like, what's your guiding light? What's your guiding purpose? We have upgrades. What can you upgrade, renew at this time? Health potion, also going along with that theme of like renewal. This one is talking about self-care and self-love, nurturing yourself. Bottom here, we have Fog of War. This is unfamiliar terrain, unknown factors. weakened, which I feel is especially relevant for winter, just because winter, less sun, we might feel weaker, less revitalized. And sidekick, just who or what can help us and support us at this time. So in this example, I consciously chose cards according to a certain theme and put them in a layout that I desired. And then from here, I just picked another deck and just laid out cards on top of each one. So North Star, 10 of Wands, Upgrades, Page of Pentacles, Health Potion, the Chariot, etc., etc., etc. Obviously, the layout is like being all covered and cramped right now, but that's the gist of how I did the reading. And then you can just take pictures of these like this. You can also slide this down, take pictures of it this way so you see the prompt text here. So yeah, that's one way I used it recently. Just picked cards consciously according to a theme and then just added tarot cards on each prompt. So for this next example, we've got the Spread Machine Change deck. This can be change regarding our society, but it can also be change from within. I think that this is the ultimate shadow work deck because it just goes real hard, dude. Real hard. The categories here, we've got shadow work. So these are, as Kim says it, cards that capture our common ego triggers. Just ego words, basically. Words related to our ego, how our ego might disservice others, really. We have flux cards. These are just overarching concepts about the world. And we have call to action. I really love the call to action addition in each of Kim's decks. Every deck honestly needs this kind of card, or every reading needs this kind of card, just some sort of call to action. What can you specifically do related to this reading after this reading is over? Really helpful categories for this overall, this change theme here. And this deck was created in 2020 after the killing of George Floyd. So there is, some history, some motivating factors that drove Kim to create this kind of deck. This deck is not that often talked about on YouTube. I understand why, because talking about our egos and these shadowy things is hard. And I think because it's kind of social activist related, it's just a little bit less approachable. It's not very easy to be all like love and light about things like this when you have freaking exploitation right in front of you. But this deck does not have to be only for social justice, social activism type stuff. So in this example reading, I wanted to use this deck to help me explore my card of the month a little bit better. So I have two cards of the month, one tarot, one oracle. My oracle card of the month is this card here, Goddess. Light attribute, the feminine expressed through wisdom, nature, life force, sensuality. Shadow attribute, exploitation of the female nature and form. Ooh, glare, but oh well, we're gonna move on with this. So to demonstrate how I put together this reading, I took each category and I just shuffled them and randomly drew cards. So let's say the shadow work category, I shuffled and then put a card down. For flux, I shuffled, put a card down. Call to action, I wanted to do two cards because I wanted to put them on the sides here. So I just shuffled and I put two random cards down. So in this demo reading, I am choosing cards randomly as opposed to the previous one where I went through and consciously chose the cards. And to recreate the reading, we have Judgment here. We have Education, that's the flux card. And on the sides, we have Speak and Reciprocate. I felt like this was going to be a very cute little shape here, this like star-ish kind of shape. And here I could have drawn another tarot card for each one. And actually I did, but then I put those cards back because I felt like I just wanted to journal about these concepts in an open-ended way. I just didn't want the tarot cards to like box me in and, give extra weight that I didn't really need. I felt like this was already a lot to explore. So for example, Judgment. How have I falsely judged or misinterpreted something? I thought about the goddess archetype. I thought about how I or society, we have a tendency to want to dismiss like feminine traits. And I know personally, I used to dismiss like the idea of sensuality because I was like, well, just because I'm a girl doesn't mean I have to be sensual. And I think sensuality is kind of dumb and unnecessary. But as an adult, I feel like there is a place now in our lives and in our society for sensuality. I thought a lot about how sensuality and caring for our bodies physically is not much of a thing now in American society. Or like if it is, it's in a way that is very sexual. I had a lot of thoughts and feelings about sensuality related to sexuality and sensuality not related to sexuality. And then so on and so forth for the rest of these cards. So like, how does education and goddess apply? For me, I honed in on the keyword curiosity. So what can I be curious about in the goddess archetype this month? And then speak and reciprocate, how can I and maybe express more about the goddess archetype. How can I like embody the goddess archetype? So that's another example reading or use for these cards, using them as, journaling prompts and randomly choosing cards. So here's, my little tarot journal entry about that. In this last example, this is about my tarot card of the month. So what I did here was I first wanted to do a tarot spread. When it comes to Oracle, I never really do Oracle card spreads, but when I do tarot, I always love doing multiple tarot cards. So my tarot card of the month was the Six of Wands. So what I did was I wanted to find the Six of Wands in the deck. Here we are. I pulled the cards before and after the Six of Wands. Of course, I could have just shuffled and drawn them like a normal tarot reading, but sometimes I like to do the before and after card method. And then what I did was I just decided to pull a simple 3-card spread with the Spread Machine base deck. So in this example, I took each category and shuffled them and also drew one just like the other example. So light work, we have compassion for a Page of Pentacles, we have shadow work, we have repression for Six of Wands, and call to action, we have manifest for the Devil. Now, with this one, I could read like these 3 as its own spread. I don't have to tie specifically Page of Pentacles to compassion, but I just chose to because why not? So this was just really making up some spread positions for each cards, making up some clarifying cards for the tarot cards. And I could have done this in reverse where I did these cards first and then I did the tarot cards afterward. Does it make a difference? You tell me. Sometimes it does, sometimes it feels like it doesn't. A lot of the use of this deck is just intuitive and playing around. There's not really any cold, hard rules with this deck. Although I do agree that sometimes having some guidelines, seeing how some other people use it might be beneficial. So then with my tarot card of the month and this reading here, I did some more journaling. Ta-da! I mean, not that I need to show proof or something that I did journaling. I just like to show my journal pages. I guess I just want to share that that's how these spreads, these cards have inspired me and jogged some inspiration for journaling. So those are some examples of how I use the Spread Machine cards recently. I hope that this exploration was helpful or fun. This is one of my top prized decks. It's just something that I feel very connected to on like a soul level. So I'm happy to have the chance to show it on camera and just show some ways that I've used it and found it helpful. And again, you don't have to specifically buy this deck to be able to play around with your own spreads and spread positions. I hope I conveyed the idea that the gist, the appeal, the main thing about this deck is just play, open-endedness. It takes time to intentionally play with these cards and to exercise your creativity. If you're more into quick or straightforward readings or exercises, I know this deck might not really appeal to you, and that's okay. There's tons of pre-created spreads on Pinterest and Instagram and other places already for you to choose from. And I'm sure that there's more ways to use these cards than even I can think of. So if you have ideas on how you would use these cards, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Kim Tan, for creating this deck. That is all I got for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.